For this winter bucket hat, I used a super bulky weight yarn. I used this Bernat blanket yarn. It's very soft, so I thought it worked good for this project. And I used the color Purple Plum. It's a 100% polyester yarn. I also used a size 8mm crochet hook, a pair of scissors, a stitch marker, and a yarn needle to sew in your ends. You could actually use a different kind of yarn and even a different hook size. Because I made this hat using measurements, it would actually work to use a different weight yarn and a different hook size, but for a similar look to mine, this is what I used to make mine. So to get started, we're going to start with a slip knot on our hook. And I'm going to chain 2. So 1 and 2. And into that first chain we made, or the second chain from the hook, remember that loop on your hook doesn't count as anything, so 1 and 2. Into that chain, we're going to do 6 single crochets. So working right into that chain, we will do our first one. But because this yarn is kind of fuzzy, the stitches can be harder to see. So I'm actually going to mark that first stitch. We are going to be working in the round for this pattern, so it's important to mark the first stitch of each round. So I'll mark that first single crochet. So that was 1, 2, and I'm working these all into that same chain. 3, going back into that same chain, 4, 5, and 1 more. And that's round 1 complete. So for round 2, I will remove this stitch marker. Make sure you can see where the top of that stitch is. And I'm going to go into that stitch with 2 single crochets. So there's the first one, which I will mark. And go back into that same stitch with a second. And sometimes you have to kind of feel around when you're using this fuzzier yarn. It can be a little bit harder to see those V's at the top of the stitch, but if you just kind of feel around in there, you'll be able to feel the top of that stitch and you'll know where you have to put your stitch. And there's 2 into the same stitch. And for round 2, it's just 2 single crochets into every stitch all the way around. So there was 2 into that stitch, jumping to that next stitch. Again, make sure that when you go into it, you have that V or those 2 strands on top of your yarn. We will put 2 stitches into that one. And I'll just stay on camera and finish up this round with you. Jumping to the next stitch, 2 single crochets into that same stitch. 2 into the next. And I have 1 final stitch prior to my stitch marker, which I will put 2 single crochets into that stitch. So at this point, you should have 12 single crochets all the way around. And for round 3, I will remove that marker. Round 3, we're going to start with 1 single crochet into that first stitch that I just removed my marker from. I will remark that stitch. And the next stitch will get 2 single crochets into it. or a single crochet increase, which is 2 single crochets into that same stitch. So there was 1 and 2 into the same stitch. Jumping to that next stitch, we're going to do 1 single crochet. And the next stitch we'll get 2 single crochets. And that's the repeat for round 3. It's 1 single crochet into the next stitch and 2 single crochets or a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And I'm going to repeat that around, and when I make my way back to the stitch marker, I'll come back on. All right, I just finished up round 3, and I finished this round with a single crochet increase into that final stitch. So 2 single crochets into the same stitch. That's how you'll know that you did each round correctly, if you're ending the round with 2 single crochets into the same stitch. If you work your way around and that final stitch works out to be just 1 into that stitch, then unfortunately something somewhere around the round got a little bit messed up. So at the end of round 3, you should have 18 single crochets all the way around. And for round 4, again, we're going to do 1 single crochet into that first stitch that I just removed my marker from. And I'll remark that stitch as the first of round 4. And then it's going to be 1 single crochet into the next stitch. And then 2 single crochets into the next stitch. So 1 and 2. And 1 single crochet into the next stitch. 1 single crochet into the next stitch. And 2 single crochets into the next stitch. 1 and 2. And that's the repeat all the way around. 1 single crochet into the next stitch, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, 2 single crochets or a single crochet increase into the next, 1 single crochet into those next 2 stitches, and a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And I'm going to repeat that around, and again I should be ending the round with 2 single crochets, and at the end of round 4 you should have 24 single crochets all the way around. And going on to round 5, I'll remove my marker. It's going to be 1 single crochet in the first 3 stitches. I will remark that first stitch. So that was 1 single crochet into the first stitch, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and 1 single crochet into the next stitch. And then we're going to do our increase stitch, or 2 single crochets into that next stitch, 1 and 2. And then it's 1 single crochet into the next 3 stitches, 1, 2, and 3, and 2 single crochets into the next stitch. And I'm going to repeat that around, and at the end of round 5 you should have 30 single crochets around. All right, I just completed round 5, and going on to round 6, we'll remove our marker, and we're going to do 1 single crochet into the first 4 stitches. So I will remark that first stitch as the first of round 6. And that was the first one. We'll jump to the next one, single crochet into the next, and single crochet into the next. So we have 4 in a row, and then we will do our increase stitch. So 2 into the same stitch. So you're probably starting to notice that pattern now, where on each increase row, we are increasing the number of single crochets prior to that increase stitch, or the 2 single crochets into the same stitch, by 1. So for the previous round that we just completed, round 5, it was 1 single crochet into 3 stitches, and then we did 2 into the same stitch, and then 1 into 3 stitches, and then 2 into the same stitch. And for this round, it's going to be 1 into 4 stitches, and then an increase stitch. 1 into the next 4 stitches, and then an increase. And then for the next round, round 7, it'll be 1 into 5 stitches, and then an increase stitch, and then 5 single crochets in a row, and then the increase stitch, and so on. So I'm just going to keep completing these increase rounds until, I'll bring in my measuring tape here, my circle measures right around 6 inches in width. So for me, that's going to be 9 rounds total. So I'm going to go ahead and complete that off camera. Remember, we're on round 6. So then for round 7, it's going to be single crochet into 5 stitches, and then the increase. Round 8, it'll be single crochet into 6 stitches, and then the increase. And round 9, it's going to be single crochet into 7 stitches, and then the increase. I hope that all makes sense. It does not matter how many rounds you have for the top of this bucket hat. The more important thing is that the circle measures that 6 inches in width. So whether that's at the end of this round or whether that's at the end of 10 rounds, it does not matter. Just stop when you reach that measurement and then come back on. Right, I just completed round 9. At this point, I have 54 stitches around. You might have a different stitch count at this point, and that's completely fine. I do want to mention, when you're counting rounds, make sure you're counting to the right of that stitch marker and not to the left. If you count to the left, you'll end up with 1 round less than the round number you're actually at. So you see, if I count to the right, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. So I just completed round 9. And if I measure it at this point, you can see I'm actually a little bit over, but that's completely fine. I'm kind of at 6.5 inches, but that's completely fine. Just somewhere in this vicinity, that will work out completely fine. So at this point, we're going to start working up the hat. So we're not going to do any more increase rounds. So for round 10 for me, or whatever round you're at, we're just going to do 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way around. So again, marking the first stitch of every round, not doing any increases. We just jump to the next stitch, single crochet into it, single crochet into the next stitch, and so on. And at this point, we're just going to keep working up rounds and rounds of single crochets, 1 into each stitch all the way around. And at the end of each round, you should have the same number of single crochets as you had in the final round after you completed your increase rounds. So remember, I had 54, so at the end of each round, when I'm just doing 1 single crochet into each round, I'm also going to have 54 stitches. So just make sure you're ending up with that same stitch count. And we're going to keep working rounds of 1 single crochet into every stitch, and eventually this will turn up and you'll start getting, well, I guess it would look like a basket if you were at this point, but it's just the hat taking shape, And we're going to keep working up the rounds of single crochet until the sides, and when I say the side, it's from when we started the single crochet into every stitch around rounds. So we're not going to include when we were doing the increase rounds. We're just going to measure from the first round where we started 1 into every stitch, and we want to keep working that up until it reaches 4 inches. So I will show you this a little bit better in the next clip. And for me, that's going to be the end of round 20. All right, I just completed round 20. You can see it's taken the shape of a hat. So I talked a little bit in the previous clip about how you wanted the measurement here to be 4 inches of those 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So if you remember, when we were making our initial circle, I did 9 rounds of increases, and I'm not going to include those rounds in the measurement. So if I count from the beginning here, this is that initial circle we made. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then if I put it on my side, or on the side here, I'm not going to include those rounds when I measure. So I have my finger on the 9th round. If I measure from the round that we just completed up to that 10th round, so the round above my finger there, it's exactly 4 inches. And that's what you want your measurement to be too. You want to keep completing these rounds of single crochets until it reaches that 4 inches. So going on to round 21, I will remove my marker here. Again, it doesn't matter what round you're at. This is just the first round of the rim. And I still have 54 stitches all the way around, but it really doesn't matter the number of stitches you have around. We'll just think of this as the first round of the brim and no longer the round count. I hope that makes sense. So for the first round of the brim, we're going to single crochet into that first stitch, but instead of going into that stitch like normal, so typically we have those 2 loops on top of our hook, and the loop that is closest to us here is the front loop, and that loop that's furthest away is the back loop. We're just going to single crochet into that front loop only. So just catching that front loop of the first stitch on our hook and doing our single crochet into it, like so. And again, I will mark that first stitch of the brim. And for this whole round, we're going to be working in that front loop only. So we did our single crochet into the front loop only for the first stitch. Into the next stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets into that stitch. 1. Again, I'm just working in that front loop only for the entirety of the round. And 2 into the same stitch. And then going on to the next stitch, we're going to do 1 single crochet. And into the next stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets. 1 and 2 into that same stitch. And that's the repeat all the way around. It's going to be 1 single crochet into the next stitch in the front loop only, and 2 single crochets into the next stitch in the front loop only. And I'm going to repeat that all the way around. So you work that around on your hat here, And when I've made my way back around, I'll come back on. All right, I'm coming to the end of round 1 of that brim. I have one final stitch remaining, and I'm going to do my single crochet increase or 2 single crochets into that stitch. Again, even for this round of the brim, round 1 of the brim, you should be ending in 2 single crochets right before reaching your stitch marker. So I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and for round 2 of the brim, it's just going to be 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around, and I'm no longer going to be working into that front loop only. The only reason we did that on round 1 was just to help the brim kind of stick out a little bit. So for the remainder of the brim, it's just going to be 1 single crochet into the stitch like normal. So I'll remark that stitch. And jump to that next stitch, single crochet. It's just 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around, just like normal. And for the remainder of the brim, it's just going to be rounds of single crochet, and you'll see that as you work up more rounds that it'll start to come out a little bit, looking more like a bucket hat. But we're going to do rounds of 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around until that brim reaches approximately 2 inches. So when we're measuring, we're going to start on round 1 where we did the single crochets and the single crochet increases into the front loop only, starting on that round, and just keep working it up until we get to approximately 2 inches. You can also just keep putting this on your head and finish whenever you think this brim is wide enough, but I'm going to build it up until it's 2 inches or so, right around there. All right, I just finished up round 5 of this brim, so I did 4 rounds total of just the 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way around. I actually planned on doing an additional round because with the other hat that I made, it did take that additional round, but I guess this one ended up a little bit thicker, so I only needed the 5. And you can see when I measure it, that's right at 2 inches, which I think is perfect for that brim. So we're going to fasten off at this point. I will remove my marker. And I'm going to slip stitch to that first stitch of the round, and then I'm going to fasten off. So I will chain 1, cut my yarn, pull that yarn through, and pull tight. And at this point, I'm going to bring in my sewing needle, and I'm going to go around the hat and just sew in all of these ends.